Well, this morning we're going to continue our look at the book of John. We're gonna ask an interesting question this morning, okay? But first, I want to ask a question, and kids, feel free to participate in this, okay? Feel free to participate in this question. How many of you have known somebody that it's really hard to make angry? Anybody known somebody who it's just hard to make them angry? You don't think you can possibly make them angry? How many of you have been that kid or that person who has made it your job to push the buttons until that person gets angry, right? Who's done that? Okay. My mom is a dear, sweet lady, and it's hard to make her mad, but there are times when I was growing up, I would see just how far I could push those buttons a little bit, you know? How far can I get away with this? And have you ever pushed somebody who doesn't get angry to the point where they're angry? Have you ever done that? And they snap? Okay? I don't know about you, but usually when I see that happen, I'm sitting there like this, going, I broke them. I broke them, and I don't know that they will ever be the same. And I just need to run because they may kill me, right? Anybody else ever known that? Today we're going to ask a question, okay? How do you make Jesus angry? Now, if we can all just be honest, Jesus is like that guy that you look at and you go, he never gets angry, right? I mean, he doesn't get mad. Jesus never yelled. He was the perfect child. As a baby, he never cried. He never punched his brothers. He never bit. He never pinched. He was perfect, right? Jesus never got angry. That's often what we think, right? He was the one that just had that perfectly calm voice and just always was talking to everybody in a way that was just respectful and always affirming and all of this, right? How many of you have grown up kind of thinking that way about Jesus? That he was just kind of that really nice guy that you could never make angry. Well, today we're going to look at what makes Jesus angry. In the Gospel of John, the book of John, who was one of the closest disciples to Jesus, in the very beginning records an event where many of us, if we were there witnessing it, would say, Jesus just lost his mind. Okay? I mean, Jesus at this point, if you were to be there and watching this event that's about to unfold, most of us would be sitting there thinking, oh my goodness. What happened to Jesus? They broke him, you know, and now we don't even know what's going to happen because Jesus gets angry. And he not only gets angry, but he does some stuff that we would never expect Jesus to do. Okay, so we're going to read a little bit of this story about what happens and what made Jesus mad. And we're going to talk about why he got so mad and actually why it was a good thing that he got mad, okay? And why we can actually have that same kind of attitude in a lot of ways, okay? So let's look at the story here a little bit. John chapter 2, verses 13 through 22 is what we're going to be reading. The Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now the Passover, real quick, the Passover was one of the biggest party times, biggest feasts in all of Israel. If you followed God at all, if you followed the God of Israel at all, you did your best to go to Jerusalem on the Passover. So this is a big time, a big time, a big celebration, and people are coming and worshiping God at least this one time a year. So Jesus went up to Jerusalem, and in the temple he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons and the money changers sitting there. And this is where we can sit here and say, Jesus just lost his ever-loving mind, okay? And making a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And he told those who sold the pigeons, take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of trade. And his disciples remembered that it was written, zeal for your house will consume me. So we've seen it when people get angry, okay? And here's the thing that I think is so interesting. When you know somebody, how many of you know somebody who just gets angry all the time, right? When you know somebody who gets angry all the time, they start yelling and you just tune them out, right? It's like, I really don't care. If it's your boss, you don't care what they're saying when they're losing their mind. Why? Because they lose their mind on a regular basis. This is nothing special, okay? But think about everybody who's followed Jesus, and Jesus has done all these teachings and done all this stuff, and all of a sudden walks into the temple, the holy place. I mean, it's like walking into church, okay? Walks into church and turns around and makes a whip and goes around beating the people with it and the oxen and grabbing their money, throwing it on the ground, grabbing the tables, flipping them over. Jesus just lost his ever-loving mind. Right? I mean, what in the world would make Jesus so angry? Now, a lot of times, if we can all just be honest with each other, this makes us all a little bit uncomfortable because we don't think Jesus should act that way. Right? I mean, like, if I was going to be honest, if one of my kids got mad, came into church, threw the money across the ground, grabbed a table, and did their best to flip it over. Thank you, Tristan. You're so kind. You know what I would do? There would be some serious repercussions, okay, if they acted that way. But Jesus does it. And we know that Jesus never made a mistake. Jesus never sinned. So how in the world is this okay? There's a couple of things that we got to ask ourselves and we got to look at, okay? The biggest question we got to ask is, what made Jesus do this? Why would he do that? I mean, why would he do something so rash? There's a couple of reasons, okay? The people who were doing it made it more difficult for outsiders to worship God. You got to understand a little bit of how the temple was built. Where all of the guys who were selling everything were, you see, they couldn't let just anyone into the closer parts of the temple. It's like if we were to view the church as the temple, okay? You had to be a Jew to be in the sanctuary, okay? And if you weren't a Jew, you could hang out in the foyer and listen to it through the speakers or watch it on the TV or something, but you couldn't come inside. And what they did is they basically set up everything out where those who were not born Jewish would come in and try to worship. They made it difficult for outsiders to worship God. They didn't make it easy. They made it more difficult for outsiders to worship God by having this stuff established out there. That's one of the things. Here's one of the other things that they did. They took advantage of people wanting a right relationship with God. Here's what they would do. This is so dirty. This is so wrong, okay? They would actually, because in that day, when you came to the temple, you would give a temple tax. You would give money to help support the temple, to support the people who were there, and all of this. And what they did is they actually said, your typical money is not good enough. Okay? The Roman coins that you have are no good here. They're dirty. Okay? You can't use those. So what we have done for your convenience, right, is we've set up a table where you can come in and you can exchange your money for a fee to get temple money. Now, how many of you just think that sounds a little bit wrong, right? I mean, they're coming in, and it's like they're coming in, and they've got, the certain amount, and they go, and they want to worship God. They want to serve Him. They want to do the right thing. They want to give, and they want to support, and they want to do all this. And they come in, and they've got their money that they've saved up or whatever, and they go to give it. It's like, wait, you've got to go over here. And they go over there to exchange it, and then they find out that now they've got to come up with even more money because it doesn't equal the same amount. Because their money was, quote unquote, not holy enough. Not good enough. It wasn't right. So what they're doing in reality is they're sitting there, they're telling them, you got to do this special stuff to really be found holy by God. Okay? You want to have a right relationship with Him? That's awesome. But you've got to go to these extravagant extents in order to really, do this and to really be found worthy and holy by God. And they began to take advantage of the people. And they began trying to find a way to make more money, to get more out of them, to take advantage of all these people who want a right relationship. Hey, they desire to be in good standing with God, and we are the stakeholders for it. So now let's find a way to charge them. And Jesus loses his mind. And then the story continues, because let's face it, if somebody walked in here and just began flipping over tables and everything, what are we going to ask them? What are you doing? Right? Why are you here? What purpose is this? And that's what the people in the temple began doing. They began asking Jesus some questions, and we got to look at this a little bit to understand what exactly is going on, okay? So the Jews said to him, "What sign do you show us for doing these things?" In other words, what authority do you have to come in here and do this? What sign do you show us for these things? And Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." And the Jews said, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and will you raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking about the temple of his body. And when therefore he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken. What's happening in this passage? What's going on? Why is that important? Let's face it, if anybody came in to the temple and began doing this, they came in and began, turning over money, things and everything, most people would think they're crazy. And they would ask them, "Why are you doing this?" And if they just said, "Well, I'm just angry," then that wouldn't have been enough. They would have kicked them out, told them, "Get out, don't ever come back," had them arrested, whatever. They would have taken care of it. But Jesus, when they come to him and they say, "What authority are you doing this?" And he tells them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it back up." Not talking about the physical building of the temple, but talking about his physical body. In other words, what he's saying is, you want to know what authority I have? You want to know under what authority I've got? When you kill me, you won't be able to finish the job, because I will rebuild my life. I will come back and establish that the authority I have is not from man, but from God. So, in all of that, what makes Jesus mad? What is the thing that makes Jesus lose his ever-loving mind? And we all need to know this so that we can not do it, right? Okay? Because we don't want the Son of the living God angry with us by any means. What is it that makes Jesus mad? Making it difficult for people to know and worship him. If you make it difficult for someone to know and worship him, you're going to make Jesus lose his mind. That's how he works. And here's a prime example. You see all these kids in here? All of them? If you, as an adult, you go and you begin leading one of these kids astray, and you begin telling them to do something that's wrong, you encourage them to do the wrong thing, you encourage them to walk away from God, you discourage their relationship with God, you do any of that. You know what Jesus actually says about that? He actually says, you know what, it would be better for you to take a millstone, a giant rock, tie it around your neck and go jump in the sea. It would be better for you than to lead any of these astray, to lead any child astray. Now, we can apply that to all of the kids in here, right? Because here's the thing. All of us adults in here, these kids are watching us. It's terrifying, right? I mean, absolutely scary. It's one of those deals where when my kids start doing something that I've done, I didn't realize that there were certain words that I say that I didn't think were that bad until my daughter said them, right? I mean, it's like, oh. And now it's even more so when we watch TV shows. And they'll start asking questions. Well, what does that mean? And we're like, geez, thanks Disney for that one, because they'll put stuff in there that it's like, dang it, And you never think about those things until all of a sudden the little one is beginning to imitate you. And you're like, all right, well, I can't say that anymore. Can't watch that show anymore. Can't do that anymore, And you begin to process things different. Now think about this also. Do we make it difficult, especially for those of us who have been in the church for a really long time? Sometimes we get this idea that you've got to act a certain way in order to come to church. There was a reason that several years ago we had two people who came into the church and they were high as a kite, right? I mean, you could look at them and just see that they had something going through them that they didn't need, and they were just right there in the front. And a lot of times in a lot of places, those type of people would be taken out because they, it's disrespectful, it's this, it's that. But here's kind of the attitude and the posture that we've got to make sure we have. Are they better off out there not hearing? Or are they better off listening? And maybe God will get them something. I got to be honest. For me personally, I don't care if somebody comes in here drunk, high, whatever. If they start hurting other people, we'll take care of it, right? But if they're in here and they're hungover and they're any of the things that we look at and we go, man, what a mess. Do we make it difficult for them to find Jesus? Or do we make it easy? I've talked about this before, but there's a pastor in Arkansas. Arkansas, middle of the Bible Belt, right? I mean, everybody wears like 3-piece suits going to church and all of this, and it's very, it's very different from here, okay? We'll say that. And this pastor, he enjoyed just wearing a suit. Why? Because he didn't have to think about what he was going to wear in the morning, right? Because he just put a suit on. He was good. And he had somebody come to him and he said, "You're the pastor of this church, aren't you?" And he says, "Yeah, I am." And he goes, I watch your services on TV. I really appreciate what you say." And he goes, "Well, you should actually come. You should come to a service. Come check us out." And he says, "I would never fit in there. I can't afford nice clothes like you have." And this pastor, hearing that, went back to his church, back to his staff, and he said, "I will never wear a suit and a tie again if it stands in the way of somebody hearing the gospel of Christ." Okay? There was a choice to be made. Are we going to make it easier for people to find a relationship with God, or are we going to make it difficult? If you want to make Jesus mad, make it difficult. Make it difficult. Jesus wants people to have a relationship with His Father. That is the entire reason He came, lived among us, and died on the cross. It wasn't so He could prove a point. It wasn't so people would do what He wants. It wasn't for anything. He wanted people to have a relationship with His Father. That's the thing. And here's the question I want all of us to examine ourselves on. I want all of us to think about here for a little bit. Think on this question. Are you helping or are you hurting? Are you making it easy for some of these little ones to follow Jesus in the right way? Or are you causing them to question it and fall away? It's a good question to ask. If somebody comes in who they don't fit, they look different than maybe you do, they don't quite, they come in and they're dealing with whatever, and you can just tell, you smell the alcohol, you smell the pot, whatever, you smell it on them, and you sit there. Are you going to make it easier for them to find a relationship with God, or are you going to just kind of put your hands up like this and step backwards? It's an honest question, right? What's going to be your attitude? Are you going to help people find a relationship with Jesus? Are you going to help them see their life restored and made whole? Or are you going to push them away and tell them, you need to go get cleaned up before you can be here? You need to go get cleaned up. You need to go get that taken care of. You need to come back when you don't have this or you don't have that. What are you doing? Are you helping or are you hurting? Are you helping somebody or are you hurting them? And a lot of times, okay, here's the most shocking thing to me, okay? And just think about this just a minute. The money changers, the people who were selling the sheep and the oxen and the goats and the birds, all of those people thought they were doing a good thing. They thought that they were trying to help people be holier. They were trying to help people be better. They were trying to help people live up to the standard that they thought it should be. They did not know that they were making it more difficult. They thought they were doing a good thing. And we have to ask ourselves, are we making it easy or are we making it difficult by those things that we think are good? By those things that we have added, those rules that were not there? Are we making it more difficult or are we making it easier for people to find a relationship with God? That's the question we've got to ask ourselves. I'm going to ask if the worship team will come back up. We're going to take some time and worship the Lord for a little bit again.